Hello and welcome to Living in the Promised Land, an immigrant rights podcast. This is your host, Mark Schmorley, and with me today is Marty Rosenbluth, who is one of the lawyers for Rumeysa Ozturk, the student from Tufts University, graduate student who was, as we all saw on video last month, snatched from the streets in the late afternoon as she was walking to her iftar to break her fast during Ramadan with her friends, had no idea, had not been informed that there was any issue with her immigration status, and was, as you can see from the video, shocked and not allowed to speak to an attorney, not allowed to speak to anybody. Her phone was taken. She was whisked off from Massachusetts to Louisiana to some of the worst immigration detention centers in the United States. And it's the same place where many people, including Mahmoud Khalil, are being held. And so, Marty, welcome.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. And so, Marty, this week there was an event in the immigration court in Louisiana. And if you can just give us an update of what's happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, we presented tons of evidence that Rumeysa was not a danger to the community and she was not a flight risk. The standard for immigration bonds in the immigration court is that the burden is on the individual to show that they're not a flight risk and they're not a danger to the community. And, we had dozens of letters from people in the community who knew her well, saying that she was not the flight risk and not a danger to the community. There was even an op-ed in the Tufts daily newspaper from the Tufts Friends of Israel calling for her release. And the government attorney and the immigration judge just flat out ignored all of that stuff. I mean, the only thing that the government presented and the only thing that the judge relied on was literally a one paragraph memo from the State Department to ICE, saying, and I should I read the whole thing,
Yeah,
Margaret?
read the whole memo. That would be great.
Yeah, the whole memo is just nothing. So what it says is that hang on. So in response to a request from DHS ICE and the assessment of DHS ICE that Rumeysa Ozturk has been involved in associations that, quote, may undermine U.S. foreign policy by creating a hostile environment for Jewish students and indicating support for a designated terrorist organization, including co-authoring an op-ed that found common cause with an organization that was later temporarily banned from campus. The Bureau of Consular Affairs approved revocation effective immediately of the F1 status of basically of, I won't read the
Right.
case
It's just the
numbers.
bureaucratic part. So
Um,
Marty, let me just ask you, this memorandum was written last week, two
March
months ago,
21st,
March 21st of which year?
this
It was
year,
last year. It was last year,
2025?
2024. This is
No?
no? Was this not a
Read
year
the
old?
memo, Mark. I just sent it
No,
to you.
not the memo, the op-ed. The
Oh, yeah,
op-ed.
no, the op-ed was
Yeah, the op-ed. No,
2024,
the
correct.
memo was right here. The memo
Yeah,
is right here. The op-ed was 1 year old.
correct.
So this was and this was not something that was written in secret. It was not something that they discovered. This was an op-ed written in the student paper that anybody can search. And we'll put the link in the show notes. But the op-ed, so I think it's important before we talk about some of the process is to talk about what is this op-ed? Um, so the op-ed was in response to um, it was in response to the student senate at Tufts voting on four measures, one of which failed, which was to stop exchange programs with Israeli universities, and that one was a 16-16 tie, and so it did not pass. But three of them did. One was to stop selling Sabra hummus on campus at Tufts, and in the to stop it being served in the dining hall. And Sabra is in a partnership with Kraus, um, uh, a, a a food supplier in Israel, the largest one, which is a supporter of the Golani Brigades, which are notorious for their human rights violations on the West Bank, to go into villages, to burn them down, to terrorize civilians on the West Bank, and it's got a historically notorious unit of brigade of the Israeli military. Um, Also, one of the other measures that passed was to have the university disclose its investments and its foreign investments in foreign countries and companies that work in Israel, and to divest. And the other one was to have an open meeting with the Palestinian student organizations and the regions to discuss the university's reaction after October 7th, and which they viewed as one-sided because it criticized Hamas but did not criticize Israel. Those three passed. The university then responded by saying, "All views count, but this is one-sided, and we're not going to honor it." As as a former student government person myself, at my university, I understand that the university can always overrule the student government, and they did here. And so Rumeysa, representing the graduate students, and three other individuals representing organizations, co-authored an op-ed telling the university to respect the student senate and to engage with to honor what they passed. And that is the sum total of
That
this
was the sum
letter.
total. That was it.
That's it.
And
That's how I view it.
the judge, relied solely, and actually, I should probably read the next sentence because the next sentence is really key. Is it said that due to ongoing ICE operational security, this revocation will be silent. The Department of State will not notify the subject of the revocation. And I don't know why this pisses me off so much, but the last sentence, the Department of State will not notify the subject of the revocation, was underlined in pencil in the version of the memo they submitted to the court. So this was why Rumeysa was so freaked out, so frightened when she was grabbed, off the street by these masked thugs. I mean, it's the only way to classify them because she had no idea who they were. And she kept asking and asking and asking, who are you? Why am I being taken? Am I being arrested? What is going on? And they didn't like say, no, we're not going to answer you, but they just didn't answer her. So she had no idea what was going on. She actually thought she was being kidnapped. She had no idea who these people were.
And I know that within I mean, the way you described it is the normal way that the way you described asking for a bond is the normal thing that, the normal way that it works in immigration court. I mean, barring a conviction, certain convictions don't allow you to be bonded, but does she have any criminal record?
Nothing. No, there's no, she doesn't, well, she doesn't even have a driver's license, so she's never even driven in the United States. So she never even has, one of these silly driving without a license reasons to try to deport people. But no, she's never been arrested. Never. And she's never even been accused of any crimes.
And in court, did the judge ask the government to elaborate on this one paragraph perfunctory State Department memo?
No, and in fact, we, tried to use the article in the Washington Post saying that, there's this internal State Department memo saying that there's no evidence at all against Rumeysa. There's no evidence at all that she's ever been involved in anti-Semitic activity. And the the trial attorney, I'm trying to avoid sarcasm in my voice, but oh, I don't know anything about any memos. No, don't. It's not, what the Washington Post, they can say whatever. But I can't believe that she was not prepared for that question. I can't believe that she didn't know of the existence of these memos. But this is all they had. And it's also very important. It's very important to say that the trial attorney was mostly arguing flight risk, that the trial attorney made almost no argument at all about danger to the community, but that's what the immigration judge focused on.
And that's interesting because um this is somebody whose face was all over the media. This is somebody who is from another country, and uh the government is arguing that they're going to be hiding themselves within the United States in order to stay here when their only purpose of being here is to be in the university, is to study, to complete their studies at Tufts University. And somehow they're going to be on the run like they're a criminal and that they would want to be here that badly.
Exactly. And all the letters of support said basically, look, all Rumeysa wants is to be able to finish her degree. And the immigration judge completely ignored that argument.
Yeah, and this just shows the world where there's not even something that we can argue against. And I think um so the question is, well, first of all, so the next step for her for immigration um is what? What's the next step in court for her?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. So what we're arguing now is whether or not the immigration court has the authority to review the revocation of her visa, whether or not they had the jurisdiction. And it's 100% clear under the law. I don't see how the immigration judge could have tried to conclude that she didn't. And in fact, initially, the immigration judge ruled that she did not have the authority to review. But we, kept arguing against it and arguing it against it. And, the what the statute says is that, okay, there's no review except except in the context of, and I'll read the quote, except in the context of a removal proceeding if such revocation provides the sole ground for removal. And that's 100% clear in Rumeysa's case. So, and the immigration judge actually said, well, okay, yeah, there's the right for review. I'm not the sure I'm the person to do it. Well, who is the person? Who is the person in the context of removal proceedings who has the right to review, if not an immigration judge? It was a joke, right? But okay, and let's be fair to the judge. Okay, she is getting her orders from up above, and these are the same, can I call them morons? These are the same morons who, deported, someone to El Salvador, and the same morons who sent an email to Harvard, saying we're revoking your funding that they later had to retract. So, I mean, these are not the brightest bulbs.
Well, yeah, and these are the people who also, when Mahmoud Khalil was arrested after making him their prime first case, uh, said we're revoking your visa, and I believe his wife had to say, "Oh no, he's got a green card. Hold on." And they had to call headquarters. So
Yeah.
we know the competence level, but we also know, and that brings us to, because our audience, doesn't we have to talk to people often about, no, these are judges, but they are really as I mean, they are. employees of the Department of Justice. They're not judges as we think with some lifetime tenure or anything like that. They can be moved to any job within the Department of Justice and
Required it will.
or yeah, and we saw it with Abrego Garcia's case when the attorney said, "Well, I'm talking to my client about why he was sent to El Salvador and what was the reasoning," and the attorney general then said, "Well, he's just a line attorney," when he's actually an appellate in a very prestigious appellate department of the Department of Justice, Office of Immigration Litigation, and so we know how quickly they would diminish them, and we know that likely if the judge had put demands on um, ICE, in this case, the ICE attorney, to uh, elaborate on the memorandum and to prove the underlying assertions of the memorandum, she probably would have been removed from the case, and that could have happened, right?
Um, Very much so. So what's happening at the moment is that we're briefing whether or not the immigration court, well, and this judge in particular, has the authority to has jurisdiction to review the revocation of the visa. And we're of course convinced that she does. Of course, that doesn't mean that we win, but it means
Right.
that she at least has the jurisdiction.
Well, and then if you don't win, then it goes to the Board of Immigration Appeals, which is again under the Department of Justice, um and is going to be very, very unlikely to overturn the judge. So then this is where Louisiana comes in. Had Rumeysa been de detained in New England, where she was, and put into court in New England, she would have been in the First Circuit. But now this case would be in the Fifth Circuit, which is um, probably the most pro-government, least favorable towards immigrants uh, in the country.
Well, and it's actually important because that brings what's coming up now is that this is also being fought out in the federal court in Vermont. And we got a decision on Friday um, from the federal court in Vermont ordering that Rumeysa be transferred to ICE custody within the District of Vermont no later than May 1st. And a bail hearing will be scheduled for May 9th. And the decision from the judge, which by the way was 74 pages long, will be scheduled for May 9th, and the parties are ordered to submit briefs and present all evidence related to the issue of bail by May 2nd. And then the judge gave the government 4 days to appeal to this decision, which I believe would be Monday,
So
either
it's
Monday or Tuesday.
really a race to have that have her moved to Vermont before the immigration court makes any substantive rulings on her on the revocation issue that you're briefing. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, basically, yeah, and I mean the two strategies have been pursued in tandem, but we're hoping that the Trump administration will maybe for the first time ever follow what the immigration, what the sorry, not immigration, what the courts are telling them. So, I mean, I can't imagine, what reasonable legal basis they would have for ignoring this decision. So we are really fully anticipating that Rumeysa will be transferred to Vermont no later than May the 1st.
Okay. And now I want to pivot a bit to a couple things that you have unique knowledge, expertise, experience in. And Marty, there's nobody that I know of who has been in these detention centers in the Deep South more as an attorney more than you. And so they are remote. I mean, I can give my own example. I'm here in Maryland, and I had a client in one of the northern Louisiana detention centers. I didn't know it was northern, and my then teenage sons and I were going to New Orleans in August for 8 days, and I figured, okay, I can get up early in the morning before these teenagers wake up at noon, go visit my client and come back. And then I look on the map and it's 5.5 hours away from New
Yeah.
Orleans and not near anywhere. So talk a little bit about about the center she's in. I know we hear some things about her not getting medical treatment for her asthma. I know there was 6 asthma attacks that she's had since she's been there, and so that were reported. And um, what is it like in these detention centers?
Well, I actually live in Lumpkin, Georgia, which is home to the Stewart Detention Center, which is the largest immigration detention center east of the Mississippi. I originally started practicing down there because I was in a firm in North Carolina, and North Carolina does not have a long-term detention center. So all of our clients were transferred either to the Stewart Detention Center or to the Folkestone Detention Center. But both detention centers are under the jurisdiction of the Stewart Immigration Court. I say that Lumpkin is an hour and a half from the middle of nowhere. I mean, I drive an hour each way to go grocery shopping. I mean, these places really are in the middle of nowhere. And they built all of them on purpose in the middle of nowhere to make access to counsel difficult, to make access to families difficult, because, people just get demoralized when they, don't have any contact with their families or their friends. As remote as Stewart is, the Southern Louisiana ICE Processing Center makes Stewart look like urban. I mean, it really, really is in the middle of nowhere. It's surrounded by rice fields and crawfish ponds. That's the only thing out there. Um, and I mean, we were able to, to get in eventually, but I mean, it was a challenge. And the only reason, in my opinion, that we were even able to speak with her on a regular basis was the intervention of the Turkish consul out of Houston. They were very, very good in cooperating and getting us help to talk with Rumeysa by video on a regular basis. But yeah, I mean, this place is unbelievable. There isn't even a sign. Okay, there isn't even a sign off the main road that points to this place.
And how many people are detained there?
I believe at the moment it's 1,500, but I'm not exactly sure.
And they're from all over the country, obviously.
Yeah, well, and I mean, all over the world. I mean, they're all immigrant
Right.
detainees.
Right, but they're sent from there. Yeah, so
Yeah.
and this is the reality, and to be able to speak with them, you need to contact somebody and wait for an email back often, or it's different in every place, but often it's you wait for an email back and then they give you a window, and then that window might change. And I mean, is that how that works there?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, again, because of the intervention of the Turkish consulate, we have been able to communicate with her, but they didn't make it very easy. And keep in mind, when they moved her down there, her attorneys had no idea at all where she was for over 24 hours. They wouldn't tell us.
And do the judges give extra time to prepare a case because of contact with them?
No.
And and how do you get them to sign documents if they need to sign documents to review things?
Well, I mean, the prison has, basically cooperated with that because of all the attention. But otherwise, there would be no way they would have agreed to do so.
Right. Right. So, well, and the other thing is, so the question is here, um, I mean, we know with some folks that they're active. I mean, Mahmoud Khalil is a leader. He has the same role that I played in when we had our encampment for divestment and the days when I was in college, divestment from South Africa, and that he was one of the negotiators with the university, which I was at the University of Florida. So I feel a kinship with Mahmoud Khalil on that level. And but you're a public figure that way, and doesn't shy back from that. But here we have. I'm just imagining. I mean, Rumeysa was a scholar, finishing her PhD in early childhood education, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So that here she is studying her early childhood education. She, like almost the entire world, recognized the horrors, the human rights atrocities committed against the Palestinians, and she, uh, was horrified by that, which is a normal reaction, and she was horrified by her university not uh, recognizing the students speaking through their student senate a year ago. But there's nothing, it was not even her mainframe. She was not out there all the time. They do not have evidence of her at protests. She didn't organize anything, it seems.
Nope.
Not that there's anything wrong with any of that, but she didn't. So a year and a half later, she's picked up after fasting all day. After fasting all day, I don't understand people get doing this in Ramadan and doing all their schoolwork without fasting with after fasting all day, but she did. So she was, extremely hungry, uh, probably, and picked up, didn't know where she was going, didn't know who they were, didn't identify her, and here she is. So, how did they find her?
Well, I mean, we're assuming it was from this um, ultra right wing website. Um, but I mean, these organizations, have been around for decades. And the I think the main difference now with these organizations, which were always considered to be gadflies within
Which
the
organizations are we talking about?
Hmm?
Which organizations?
What is it? What is it
Well,
called?
there's Batar,
Guitar and what was
Canary Mission.
Oh, Canary Mission. Yeah, I mean, the government hasn't said, right, that that's where they got the information about her. The government hasn't admitted that. I mean, Canary Mission and Beitar, are both trying to take credit for it. But no, I mean, the government hasn't presented any evidence at all where they get, and again, keep in mind, okay, we know 100% that there are internal memos within the State Department saying that, Rumeysa has never been involved in anti-Semitic activity. She's never expressed any support for Hamas. To put it colloquially, the allegations against her are total bullshit.
Right.
Okay. And
Well,
the government hasn't presented any evidence. The only piece of evidence in inverted commas is this one paragraph memo from the State Department to ICE. There is nothing else. And let's be really clear, Rumeysa was not an activist. Okay.
right,
Um, she went to one demonstration on campus, and she was only there for about 15 or 20 minutes. That's it.
right. And so these organizations have been, like as you said, they've been around a while. They are even in the history of Israel, they were in the Zionist movement, they were extreme, and they, murdered other Zionists in historically, and they advocate violence against those that they view as not being supportive of Israel. And they, in fact, when Professor Norman Finkelstein from DePaul was at Columbia, visiting, they dropped a pager into his shirt pocket uh, to, uh, commemorate or to threaten him as to celebrate the pager attacks on i- individuals and their families who they said were connected with Hezbollah in Lebanon, but which maimed and harmed children, family members, women, and you know, civilian bystanders. And so but there was a page of Rumeysa on a separate page on Canary Mission's website with her photo and nothing specific about her, just she is, labeling her as an enemy and uh and that certainly very likely I mean, well, I don't know if it'll come into discovery, but very likely is what led them to find her because there was nothing visual about her being there, nothing that outspoken, and certainly nothing. I mean, a student newspaper um, isn't generally going to allow uh, bigoted speech on there. If somebody were to threaten somebody based on religion, race, gender, or anything else, um, a university newspaper is generally not going to allow that. And certainly that op-ed doesn't show that. So, but you have some experience because these are very, very strong organizations. And Marty, you go back uh, your involvement with Palestinian rights goes back a ways. And if you could sort of talk about your own history and then your own history with this brand of doxing.
Yeah, and okay, I mean, and let's also, put this into a historical framework. Okay, now, these right-wing organizations accuse anyone who supports Palestinian human rights as being pro-Hamas. In the past, people who, were critical of US foreign policy in the 40s and 50s, maybe even into the 60s, were called Reds, right? They
Right.
just called them communists. People who opposed the Vietnam War were called, pro Viet Cong. Or when I started getting involved in Palestinian solidarity work, they called us, pro PLO. And now they accuse anyone who supports Palestinian human rights as being Hamas. And it's and they get away with it. The only difference now is that these right-wing groups have the ear and common cause, to quote the State Department memo, with individuals inside the Trump administration who are willing to act on it. But there's no basis in reality. There's no truth at all that, Rumeysa supports Hamas. I mean, there's just nothing there.
So, I mean, this is well, in your own experience, what have you seen that where you've personally experienced any of this doxing?
Yeah, I mean, the main reason that I got on their radar is that I worked on a 90-minute frontline special on human rights in the West Bank and Gaza. And I was the chief researcher on the project, and they just waged a relentless campaign. And this was a group called Camera, against the film,
What year
where
was that?
what
What year was that?
1993.
Okay.
And they just, waged a relentless campaign against the film, trying to get PBS to retract the film. They tried to get, PBS's nonprofit status revoked. They actually tried to get the film barred. Sorry, to get the film not to be shown and then withdrawn. I then worked on another documentary film called Jerusalem and Occupation Set in Stone. and they tried to get the film withdrawn from various film festivals where it was admitted, selected to um, and they just don't want any alternative facts or any alternative vision to the mainstream Zionist narrative. So anything at all that conflicts with their narrative, they try to suppress.
Okay. Okay. So, and they've been around a while. What makes it different now?
Well, I mean, other than the fact that they actually have the ear in common cause with the Trump administration, I think, the web, I mean, the fact that, they can put something up on the web and within seconds, get hundreds of their, lunatic supporters to act, I think is the key difference.
Now, do you uh I know you're not at a university right now. I know you were briefly in law school teaching, but how do you see this as affecting uh discourse on universities? This combined with the memorandum on anti-Semitism and the different, threats to withhold funding for anti-Semitism from the administration.
Well, I mean, people are scared. I mean, people, don't want to, speak out at all. People are, don't want to, comment on their social media criticizing Israeli human rights violations. People are scared that if they say anything at all, that they might be, have their visas revoked and put into deportation proceedings. So it's a very, very frightening time for foreign students. And I don't really understand why universities are not really stepping up and protecting their students more effectively.
And how do you see this issue of anti-Semitism on campus?
Well, I mean, it's basically what, is very, very clear is that these right-wing gadfly organizations consider any criticism of Israel, no matter how mild, as being anti-Semitism. And the Trump administration has brought into it. I mean, in Rumeysa's case, we submitted an op-ed from the Tufts Friends of Israel calling for her release and calling her arrest unjust. But this
Mhm.
isn't new. They've been doing this for decades. I mean, this is what they attacked the um the film that we did with PBS. And this is why they attacked my film on Jerusalem. When my film eventually, finally, showed at the Jewish Museum in New York, after these Zionist organizations had demanded that it be withdrawn from the Jewish Film Festival, I needed police protection getting in and out of the museum because of the threats against me and because of the threats against the film.
Right. And I think I the way I view it is there is this a lot of support for Israel um among liberal American Jews didn't didn't account for this backlash, didn't realize, and now it's a real quandary. That's the Friends of Israel, writing that op-ed, might be saying something different than what they were saying a year ago when these encampments were happening, when Israel was being called out. But I think the stark reality of who the real allies of the Israeli state right now are in the United States is an extremely, to be generous, anti-democratic, anti-free speech, and, you know, probably, I would say proudly authoritarian. This isn't something they're not pretending to be to allow speech. They're not pretending to say, hey, these are people we disagree with. Let's have our vigorous point of view and we can have debates. That's not what's happening. This is a shut them down, kick them out. And I think that really offends people who like free speech, but also we're really misled about what these demonstrations were and really who was there.
Yeah, well, and I mean, what's if you if you actually go to the Canary Missions page on Rumeysa, okay,
Yeah.
there's like one sentence, okay, saying that she engaged in anti-Israel activism, and the only thing they link to there is the op-ed in the student newspaper, and they say that she is a supporter of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. But the whole rest of her profile is just her academic history and her academic profile and her academic activities. So even the Canary Mission, okay, has no evidence at all that she's an anti-Semite or that she supports Hamas. Nothing. There's nothing there.
Well, and also I think, as as a Jew who is uh opposed to you know the an ethno state and doesn't believe in that at this point, but was raised quite differently. I understand where people have been. I also understand that it is crystal clear, and actually I view, and I've told I've told the George Washington University disciplinary folks in my own testimony to them that I find it incredibly anti-Semitic to discount the views of especially younger Jews, but of all ages in the United States who do not equate their Judaism with Israel. It's offensive, and it's two separate things. And I feel like somebody made the quote, somebody made the point the other day that it's really using American Jews as human shields for their genocide.
Yeah. No, I mean it's very clear that they're just counting on, total fealty. And they're saying, I think that most, American Jews just don't buy the fact that, the claim that you cannot criticize Israeli human rights violations without being associated with Hamas. I mean, I don't think the mainstream American Jewish community accepts that anymore.
I agree, and I also think that the overuse of Hamas as something just like the overuse of the PLO is
Yep.
it renders it so that it means nothing. And so well, Marty, I want to thank you. I know you got a big week ahead on on this, and I do want to thank you. This is really valuable, and keep up the great fight. And we'll have you back on as it goes further.
Thank you so much for having me on, Mark.
All right, be well.
Take care.